Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, the Poketown store is the place to go. You can even use the OmniPoke code for an extra 5% discount on your orders. However, for today's video, it's finally time to do the review of Unified Minds. I am starting to gather my thoughts for the Cosmic Eclipse set, and before we get into that review, I always like to look over, see where I went wrong for Unified Minds, and also sort of have some foresight into how these cards might be changing come Cosmic Eclipse as well. So this is kind of like looking back on my performance, also the community's performance, to help me evaluate cards in the future. And also I'll be trying to give thoughts on some certain cards if they are more or less interesting come the next set. So let's jump straight into it. We know the ratings at this point. You can pause now if you want to. We've got the community average and the majority up in that corner as well. That's actually going on right now. My Cosmic Eclipse stuff is going on, so I'll link that in the description below for you guys to get involved in. Once again, I've translated it all with like dodgy little rubbish paint job backgrounds and stuff, but you can read the cards and you can weigh in on your thoughts of the new set before I get it in my review. I'm hoping to get it done either very late September or one of the first few days of October. That's how I'm trying to get the set review out, so it's almost time, and yeah, getting your input would be really appreciated. So we start off with Blue Strategy. This was an obvious 1-star card in my opinion. It did end up doing pretty much nothing. Yes, you can draw until you have 8, but Lily can do that for you anyway most of the time, and well, on turn 1 at least, and you get those cards immediately to play with, and Blues doesn't let you have that. So Blue is a pretty poor card. I still don't see him having much use as of next set at all. Chandelure, 1-star. There's the small niche purposes of maybe like Charizard decks trying to play that so you can get around Clear Vision, but really that's about it. There's no other reason why you would want to play Chandelure. Coach Trainer, this is definitely an above a 1-star card. I think I'd bump it up to 2. It was definitely in early renditions of Mewtwo builds, and it's pretty much a mainstay. Actually, let's put it at a 3-star, because it is pretty much a mainstay in Guardian as well. Guardian being at least a tier 2 archetype, I would say. So we've got to bump the Coach Trainer up. I think my main sort of debate was the draw power was comparable to the likes of Erica and Bill in terms of what you're getting, but there's that situation where you need to have a tag team in the active. That's kind of the stipulation, where things like Pikarom and Charizard would oftentimes rather like get one more Stellar Wish in or something like that, as that's come to be the case for sure. And even things like Greenzard, they start out with Volk so often, and if you do start out with the Volk, Coach Trainer is only getting you 2 cards, so not all that strong. Community were a bit more hyped on it, to be fair, giving it a slightly higher average rating, and I think it's those quad sort of greens decks where this can be sometimes a backup supporter where it saw the most play, which is basically only Guardian. I think Guardian survives rotation, well, not rotation, but the new set coming out. There's obviously some nice dragon stuff coming out as well for you to potentially try and have a good matchup against, so I don't see Guardian particularly going anywhere, so I believe Coach Trainer will still see play in that archetype, but not many others. Grimsley is a very cute card. It was used in the Naganadel Checkmate style decks to help you make sure you can take 3 prizes after you use a Stinger all in one turn, which is pretty cool. It's not been used in many other things, so we'll keep it at its low rating right now, but it did have a highlight reel moment with the Naga Chess deck. Hapu, rated at a 3-star. I think 3 is probably still the best way to go. Like, looking back at Worlds, it was played as a 1-of in the Cephalon that came second. It was also a 4-of in one of the top 8 Mewtwo lists. Obviously, more people have moved away from the top 8 list of Mewtwo and just play the winners list, Henry's build instead, which of course didn't play Hapu. But there is just some situations where this card is still like in 1 or 2 of copies. I don't think it's that powerful or whatever, so you might be able to bump it down to 2 stars, but for its Worlds showing, I think I'll keep it at 3. It was certainly a relevant card that we saw, and this is also the engine of a wacky new Magnezone Mewtwo deck as well that's just been popping up. I'll be recording that sometime this week. So Hapu does have its niches. I do like the discard synergy that it has. It may have additional discard synergy with other decks going forward as well. So I believe this card will remain like in that 3-star level where it can end up being like a temp supporter in a lot of different decks. you know, like a 10th count of supporters in like 1 or 2 copies, and just be like good enough to help you dig. So that's pretty cool. I also think this gets stronger with Great Catcher coming out, because one of the main reasons people dislike Hapu is you sometimes lose part of your custom catchers because you have no choice based on the top 6. Sometimes you can see multiple customs, and that's rough for you. Or just in general, you see 2 cards that are stronger than the custom at the time, and then you lose a custom catcher, which really hurts you. So with more... with less reliance on customs, more people going to great catchers, that's good for Hapu, because her digging potential is still very strong, and there's a lot less of a detrimental effect in that discard. Misty's Request is a 2-star card. I think the Slow Duck deck is like tier 3 at best. But it's obviously a mainstay in that archetype. It hasn't seen play in any other build. It hasn't made the Hat Ladies any more relevant, which I was kind of speculating with. But yeah, there's no real other reason to play Misty's Request. It could sometimes be in like Lieutenant Surge builds, trying to find like Jesse James and Mars combos, but usually that's way too slow. So yeah, not seeing a huge amount of play outside of the Ducks. Pokemaniac, 1-star card, yep. Again, I've put the most relevant 4 retreat cost Pokemon on the screen, and they're all not good. So Pokemaniac is sort of lying in wait. I haven't actually fully evaluated the amount of 4 retreat cost Pokemon in the new set. I think there's a Steelix, which has 4 retreat, and is trying to work around this Pokemaniac supporter, so it may get bumped up into being like a relevant card just because of this little rogue deck that we have in Steelix. But outside of that, not seeing much play. Cherish Ball, easy 5-star card. The card is unreal, and especially with the Sword and Shield rule changes, this card just gets even more crazy, because you need to use the Dene if you're going first to draw cards. You can't use any supporter, so Cherish Ball is going to give you good outs to the Dene. Obviously, tag teams are ruling the format right now. It's, you know, a 4-of in Abilities Art. It's a 4-of in Mewtwo. It's seen in all sorts of other decks as well, so Cherish Ball's absolutely unreal right now. Great Potion, in at a 3-star. I think it's one of these weird ones where... as you can see, my intention on the slide was to be like, yeah, it's good against 2-hit KOing non-GX decks. It's good against Tina Chomp trying to set up math with spell tags and linear attacks and stuff. Both those things have kind of flopped, and the amount of 1-hit KO decks in the format right now are really making Great Potion a useless card. So I'll put it down to a 2-star. Yes, at Worlds it was played heavily in some of the Greenzard builds. In some cases, 4 copies of Great Potion were in Greenzard, but that's become slightly dated as an archetype, seeing as though we've moved more and more towards a 1-hit KO based format. I wouldn't even say it's the best Charizard variant anymore, so I think Great Potion kind of has a backseat, and I think going forward there's only more 1-hit KO decks coming out into the new set from Cosmic Eclipse, so I don't see Great Potion being all that good. It basically takes us... like, we need to have more non-GX 2-hit KO decks in the format for this to work, and we just don't have the ball search to support those sorts of archetypes right now. So Great Potion, still a reasonable card. It could come back into relevancy, but it completely depends on the format that it's in. But it saw a chance, like, it had its chance to shine at Worlds, and it was pretty reasonable, to be fair. Reset Stamp, easy 5-star card. It's not so much a card that's in every single archetype right now, but it's in enough where we can easily call it a 5-star. I also think as this format develops, Reset Stamp will be creeping into more and more lists. There's been some successful, you know, top 32 Pikarom lists that were playing 3 Reset Stamps and Oranguru. That was top 32 at Worlds, and it made top 8 at Sheffield as well. So the heavy stamp build of Pikarom, definitely a thing. Even just like regular Pikarom playing 2 stamps. Is a thing. Stamp creeping its way into Mewtwo, creeping its way into Abilities Art as well. Obviously, it's a staple in green decks. It's part of their main win condition, is trying to combine like Stamp and Power Plant against people. So, easy 5-star card. It is still warping the game, and I think it'll become a card that more and more people make space for in the future because of the nature of the other archetypes we have right now. Like, for example, Abilities Art relying on Welder turn by turn, and stamping them to a low hand size can really punish that, especially as they go more and more non-GX. Stamp punishes them even more than ever. So, yeah, I think Stamp is going to be kind of on the rise a little bit, and might end up being one of these things where you have to be like, yeah, it's not a consistency card, but it'll win us enough games where we still make the spaces for 1 or 2 of these in the vast majority of decks, and I really don't see that changing. Actually, I think there might be an uptick in this card, again, thanks to Great Catcher, because customs take up a lot of spaces. I feel like you won't ever need to play 4 Great Catchers, and that might open up space for Stamps to squeeze into lists as well, so that's also a pretty good thing to bear in mind. Stadium Nav, I put as a 2-star, and I remember having to argue with Jack about this. He wanted to just say this was like hot garbage, and I was like, yeah, but what if Pikarom plays it? And then that definitely ended up being the case. Pikarom definitely wanted to play this card because it's a vulnerable means of getting Thunder Mountain, which meant on a 75% chance, you would basically always hit, what's it called? Full bits on turn 2 if you had access to this card or a Volkner, and that was just good enough. It was definitely in my early renditions of Pika, and that's what made it a thing. Stadium Nav hasn't really seen play in like any other deck. It's exactly the Thunder Mountain that makes it work. I speculated with Fossil decks, they all kind of flopped, and they probably would play Stadium Nav, especially if they want to be like the Welder builds, where they have a split of the Research Labs and the Giant Hearths. But again, that archetype's not really succeeding right now. So yeah, Stadium Nav has to go up to, I think, maybe a 4-star card, just because it's like guaranteed in Pikarom, which is a tier 1 deck. So my speculation was right. I just hedged on the side of caution, being like, will this card actually see play in the deck? But turns out, yes, it was definitely good enough. Tag switch in at a 4-star, I think that's definitely fair. Again, Pikarom's the star of the show. It sometimes plays only one copy of this card, but even then, it's such a game-changing card because it gets you towards Tag Bot or it gets you towards Lightning Ride for the full value. And that's important enough that it swings games. Many Pikarom lists still play 2 copies of this. Guardian sometimes playing copies of this. Even Greenzard can play 1 copy of this as well. So it's good enough in tag team decks. They are super relevant right now, and they're going to continue to be relevant as well. So I think Tag Switch will continue to be a good card for sure. And Pikarom is going to be the one holding it steady throughout this entire time, keeping it at an easy 4-star rating. Black Belt, in at 2 stars right now. It hasn't really seen much experimentation at all. The main sort of attackers that we have are all on screen, and they're not good enough in the format right now. So unless someone's able to come up with a wacky list involving some of these tag teams, obviously the typing is still there because Pikarom's still a relevant archetype, but they do have to be concerned about things like Mewtwo and Zard as well, of course, being like toe-to-toe with those. So I think Black Belt right now is just one of these cards with bags full of potential, but hasn't really realized that potential just yet. Having a quick think of Cosmic Eclipse, there aren't too many fighting types that can really benefit from this too much, so I think it may still be a card that sort of sits in the waiting room right now. So I'll bump this down to a 1-star because it's just not seen any play. I gave it to 2 just because of its inherent power, but it just hasn't realized that power just yet. Flyarium Z, obviously terrible. Giant Bomb, I gave it 2 stars. It was speculative. I remember a few early lists out there, pre-Worlds. Like I remember seeing DDG put up a Giant Bomb list of Pika. I remember some Giant Bomb lists of Greenzard for Mirror. And I was trying out with Rotom. But yeah, this also never really caught on. I also tried this with Rayquaza pre-Worlds as well. And I think we are in a very one-hit KO based format right now. So there is potential for this card to become more relevant once again. But unfortunately, a lot of the Zard decks have non-GX one-hit KO options, so they can, if you do it with the Turtonator survives and you don't really care. If you do it with the Heatran, it was going to get knocked out anyway. So a lot of the times, these one-hit KOs are from things that aren't tag teams. So the sort of theory of you putting them down a peg or two so you can then one-shot them back isn't really working out too much. This has seen some niche play in Guardian as well. Sometimes a 1 copy, sometimes 2. That might be the only place where it sees play going forward. But other than that, I don't see Giant Bomb having enough play. There's Ninetales, there's Great Catcher coming out as well, which will get around the Giant Bomb even more often. So I think this card is just going to go down in play, to be honest. So we'll put it at 1 star. There was experimentation, we tried it out, and overall it was just not strong enough. Normalium, obviously a 1. U-turn board in at 2 star. As you can see, Stellar Wish Jirachi is still the way that we're building a lot of decks. U-turn board does shine in the likes of Beheeyem. You can see Goomy and Marie pictured. They're oftentimes cards that you will attach a U-turn board onto, especially for the Beheeyem deck. A U-turn board can find its way into things like Quagnag as a 1 copy as well, just so you can pivot your Naganadel between turns so that you don't just lose energy, like charge up and retreat, basically. I think it will continue to finding its niches when there are decks not playing Jirachi, and you want that pivot. The U-turn board can provide that for you quite nicely. So I think I'll keep it at 2-star just because it'll still be a relevant card. It can sneak into lists even as a 1 copy just because it will be universal. It's also a really good one-of in Pidgeotto Control as well. I don't see a lot of Pidgeys playing that card, but it's insane in Pidgeotto Control. I really, really do like it. So I think this card can remain as a 2-star just because it's just versatile enough to grant that rating in my book. Big Oven, easy 5 stars. Giant Hearth as we know it now. Unfortunately not the right name, but the card is definitely insane, and it's been the reason, like, I attribute the 4 Welder decks to this card. They wouldn't work without the Hearth. The Hearth thins the deck perfectly. It makes Welder live in every hand. It makes you be able to 9 Temptation stuff up all the time. It always depresses me when I look back at my Unified Mind stuff. I always had Ninetales on so many slides, and then I never tested Ninetales like enough myself. Or at least I didn't go high enough in my energy count with Ninetales to actually come up with the Ability Zard deck on my own. Obviously, that was a stroke of genius from some key players, but yeah, I think the Giant Hearth is one of the things carrying fire decks on its back. And I do think there is a bit of a headache for fire coming forward because of Chaotic Swell, the new stadium card that does a stadium bounce, and then when you bounce the swell then eats up the next stadium. And fire decks are very, very reliant on Hearth. It's one of their strongest cards in the deck. It's one of the things they're always stellar wishing to try and find. So Chaotic Swell might be a headache for this Hearth because it's such an integral piece for fire decks. Blizzard Town, 1-star, as we know. This never saw play. I speculated Spiritomb. It's obviously not a strong enough deck on its own. And I speculated Green Zard Mirrors, but that never happened. The stadium that overtook Green Zard Mirrors were the Fighting Dojos, the martial arts dojo in the end. Night City, I put it 3 stars. I think Dark Box we can pretty much call a flop right now. I think it's tier 3 at best, really. It's turned out to be too inconsistent to keep up with the format right now. So I'm going to bump this to a 2-star. Even in some Dark decks, they're just playing physical switches and having Viridians and other stadiums instead, sometimes even Ultra Space. So we'll put it at a 2-star. Yes, it does give our basic Darks free movement, which is pretty awesome. And it might be coming back because I do believe Dark Box gets way stronger next set. So you'll hear me talk about, Weavile and all these other tag teams that all came out in this set, Unified Minds. And Cosmic Eclipse gives them that little extra morsel that makes them a lot more powerful. Red and Blue is a great supporter for helping you get Weavile into play, whilst also bursting 2 Dark Energies out of the deck that then you can move around however you like. And we get potentially a couple new powerful Dark Box attackers. We have the non-GX Guzzlord, which does 120 and takes an extra prize card. And we have the Naganadel Guzzlord, the big dragon tag team, which is a pretty chunky card. You can discard Pokemon to heal him up as well, just naturally, and he does decent damage output, like fairly cheaply as well. So I think Dark Box will be rising in stock come Cosmic Eclipse. I think it will get stronger for sure. Night City might become back to a 3-star card in that regard. If I was really putting my stake in the ground, I think Dark Box won't reach tier 1, but I think it will go up and stay in tier 2 come Cosmic Eclipse. I think the changes make it a lot more consistent because you don't have to play multiple stage 1s anymore. You can just play a thicker Weavile line, which is one of the biggest headaches of the deck, is people grinching Sneasels or you only finding Sneasel like on turn 2 or something and then you've already lost. So playing a thicker Weavile and having Red and Blue to be your pseudo acceleration, whilst also still being able to have B-String because you have this new Guzzlord, sometimes even the Naga Guzz build in the list for like mid-game energy burst. I think it should be fine without Naganadel now, and I think that raises its consistency and its strength and stuff. So I think it'll be much more of a thing come Cosmic Eclipse. I think it'll stay in tier 2. Might still end up being slower than a few other decks out there right now, but yeah, Night City will probably go back up to a 3-star card, maybe even a 4-star if it does overachieve, I guess. Pokemon Research Lab, I gave it a 3. I think the fossil deck has been tried out. There was obviously like this Aerodactyl Carracosta combo that we saw at Worlds. There was also a Rampardos build, Rampardos with Research Lab, which was pretty cool. I think the Ninetales in many situations pretty much ruined both of these kind of archetypes because Ninetales can bring up the Rampardos before they can power up their clean hits or whatever the other attack was called. I can't remember. And Carracosta was obviously a very good check to Ability Zard is also pretty good against Malamar, but there's just too many other decks out there right now that you sort of don't cover with this archetype, so I think it will remain like Rogue. I don't see much help for the fossils going forward. There's obviously as well the Gengar Omastar, but they oftentimes choose to play other stadiums as well, so I think Aerodactyl ended up being a bit of a flop, so we'll drop it down to 2 stars. I think there's still enough experimentation with fossils to call it not a 1-star card, but I don't think the archetype is necessarily like high on the tier list. It's still like in the Rogue range right now. Slumber Forest, I gave a 1-star card. I was basically saying that Breloom would be a flop. I think I'm going to bump this up to 2 stars, just because I think the Mareep Sleep package in Beheeyem is good enough to be probably a tier 3 deck. So I think Slumber Forest gets the nod in that regard. Sometimes even Pidgeotto Control now adds in Mareep Sleep combo with U-turn board, just to try and buy you even more turns. So I think Mareep Sleep is like a good enough mini package to be warranted a 2-star rather than 1, because it is seeing experimentation still for sure. Recycle Energy didn't end up succeeding in the Naganadel Porygon Z deck that we saw come out of Japan, but it has seen success alongside Whimsicott Porygon Z. I say success, I mean it saw play with Whimsicott Porygon Z, but the main reasons why this is seeing play is in things like Pidgeotto Control, and even Malamar now is playing 1 copy, so I'm going to bump this up to a 4-star. I think the card is definitely good enough. It'll continue to squeeze its way into decks that have colorless attack costs at times. It's a very versatile card. I think the reason I'm putting it 4-star, even though Malamar probably isn't tier 1 and Pidgeotto isn't tier 1, they're both tier 2, and they're like at the top of tier 2, so I think that's enough archetypes that are relevant that play Recycle Energy, so we're going to give it the benefit of the doubt and keep it at a 4-star. This does have to compete with a new Draw Energy coming out from Cosmic Eclipse, because there will be like colorless attackers that might want to choose to draw a card rather than recover a Recycle Energy, so it may have some competition going forward, but I do believe the card is still strong enough to keep in a number of decks. Even if it is just that one-off copy, it does so much for those players, so yeah, good card for sure. Weakguard Energy, however, has been a bit of a flop. It was kind of played in things like Alolan Eggs, with Rowlet. There was a tanking build that made it through day 1 of Worlds, I believe. So it did see its niches, but I think Fire is too dominant right now for Grass decks to be a thing. And Mewtwo decks are too busy playing Basic Energies. Basic Energies are basically ruling the format right now with Mewtwo, Zard, Pika Rom and stuff. So many Special Energies aren't getting a look in, and there's no real reason for Weakguard 2. And I think that's a similar case going forward. There are some cards coming out which might have that colorless attack cost that could be relevant. I haven't looked into it so much just yet. So I'm going to bump this down to a 1-star. I think it still is Weakness Policy in disguise. I was very hopeful for this card because it's so much more than Weakness Policy. It's not dead in every other matchup because it still is a turn attachment. That was my main sort of thing. It's not as bad of a wasted space in your deck, but because there are so many decks that do require the physical basic energies right now, it is still a wasted card in your deck. So until we get a more sort of colorless attacker out there right now, or something that always can attack for at least 1 colorless, Weakguard will continue to be weak, unfortunately. And it does also compete with the draw energy now as well, so I think it'll keep going down in play. We'll drop it to 1-star. Amoongus, 1-star. Obviously, the Breloom deck flopped, and even some Breloom decks preferred the Mareep build. Rowlet Eggs, I put it 2-star. I think that's the fair place to put it. Obviously, it had some highlight reel moments in Worlds. I think it made it through the field of day 1. But I think as soon as Ability Zard became a known quantity, obviously it did very well at Worlds. Got 4th place with one of the most well-known and loved players in the game. That pretty much just said goodnight for Rowlet Eggs, especially because there's enough non-fire attackers for you to get around like Araquanid just naturally in Ability Zard. So I think the archetype, you know what, I'm going to bump it down to a 1 even, because it's basically unplayable right now. It's super unplayable. Just the format that it's in is really ugly. I did really like its Super Growth. It had that moment at Worlds, but I think that's pretty much it. It's in the binder for good for a while, I would say. And fire decks aren't going anywhere. We're getting more one-hit KO potential in future sets as well. So I think, Rowlet Eggs got to be down to a 1-star. Serena, I have to give the same treatment, 1-star. The main reason why we could accept this Stage 2 accelerator was because of Super Growth, and that's the only thing sort of keeping it afloat, and unfortunately that's flopped. And in many of the Rowlet X decks, it didn't even play Serena either. They would just go more down the tanking route, so 1 star for Serena. 1 star for Camerupt. I only talked about this card because of the Z Tackle, and because it had 4 retreat cost for Maniac, but yeah, that's pretty bad. Chandelure. We can give this more than 1 star, unbelievably. I was pretty hyped about testing this deck for sure when it first came out. You can see I kind of put a lot of effort into the slide. Some slides where I give 1 star, I put like 2 pictures on and I'm like, we all know it's bad, move on. But here I was like, but what if? And what if was definitely the right way to think about this archetype. I think Chandelure is one of the best budget decks out there right now. Requiring no Jirachis, no Dedenes. It just needs greens as like your most expensive cards. Maybe even Ninetales your most expensive card now, basically. And yeah, it hits hard if you get fortunate. And if you do get fortunate, you are able to get a bunch of other attackers into play. You're able to get more damage modifiers into play. And you're able to use the best Gust that we have in the game available to us right now. So Chandelure, I'm going to bump up to a 2 stars. I still think he is rogue and weak on the overall tier list, but he's the best Stage 2 deck we have available right now, and that's a pretty funny thing. So let's give him 2 stars. Heatran GX. Oh boy, was I wrong about this card. I only gave it 2 stars. This was mainly because I was like, well, where do you play this card? My question was simply, this can't go into greens, Zard, because it has mobility. And I couldn't piece together a good enough ability Charizard deck to warrant it being any... Like, I couldn't envisage a good enough ability Zard to knock off green Zard, basically. And that was the biggest flaw. This card is easily good enough, and I believe is a 5-star card. I think he is a driving force in why Ability Zard is so strong. It lets you work with some pretty bad hands. It lets you welder to Jirachis and Vulpixes and any other random targets like Dedenes, and you can make that come good because you have Burning Road, so you can just jump in, steal that energy for himself. 130 is a great vanilla damage for knocking out non-GXs, and you're also just able to use that GX attack for up to 600, which happens a lot. So yeah, I underestimated Heatran massively, mainly because me and a lot of other people, I guess, you can see by the community ratings, they were a little bit higher, but also sort of struggling in where you see the card seeing play. And yeah, it turns out someone made Ability Zard good, and now Heatran's a star player in the archetype. Also worth noting that it got second place at Worlds with 2 copies in Blounds. It is now also a mainstay in Blounds just because of the amount of charging ups and B-strings you can do. And again, it's one of those things where you can play all those B-strings and then play a supporter afterwards, like a shuffle draw supporter maybe. And then you can find a Heatran, which means basically like if you don't have a Blound in hand, you can still blow all your B-strings on Nagas, knowing that you have this on the sort of back end of your turn as well. So the Heatran's a good enough card in Blounds. It's also your way around Guardian from just stopping you with an Ultra Beast Fairy Charm. So yeah, I think 5-star because it is in the strongest deck in the format, debatably. And also it's in Blounds, which is a tier 2 deck. And yeah, Heatran will continue to be strong. There's the Reshiram archetype, which I believe will probably try and play this card because Reshiram has Nagas to play with, and it plays Fire Energies, so that's probably good enough. So yeah, I think this card will continue to be very, very strong, up to a 5-star for me. Carracosta, I'm going to keep at 1 star, I think. No, I might bump this to 2 star. I put the Research Lab at 2. I'll put Carracosta to 2. I think the thing that I missed from this is that it has more than just an ability. I think because it's a stage 2, even though it is like a kind of cheating stage 2, I underestimated his damage potential. For fighting in 2 colors, you do 80. Plus 20 more for each colorless in the retreat cost of your opponent's active. So I underestimated this card in terms of being able to knock out Giratinas, where they can't response knock out you with Giratina in Malamar, because you have that ability that shuts off spell tags. And also you can knock out Reshizards because they have a high retreat cost. So I underestimated Carracosta's attacking potential. You can see I was only basically talking about this card for his ability. on the slide, and I underestimated the power of Welder in these decks, basically, and Black Belt as well to a certain extent. So I'll bump Carracosta up to a 2-star. I still think the Fossil deck is on the rogue side of things, but for not seeing his full potential, I'm going to bump him up a little bit to be in line with the community. Cryogonal, 1-star, didn't see any play. Froslass, see, I don't want to give this any more than a 1-star. I still think this card is hot garbage. It's seeing experimentation in... Well, it saw experimentation pre-Worlds in Breloom, and currently it's seeing experimentation in Spiritomb. I think the only real notable deck where this card is like pretty reasonable is alongside Lucario. Froslass Lucario is like trying to be an anti-meta deck. It's still not had like any real results, but it's been played enough where I'm probably gonna have to concede that this is maybe a 2-star card. I still think it's absolute trash, personally, but it's seeing enough play as to where we'll bump up to 2 stars. Obviously, there's enough fire in the format right now for this card to be tempting for people to try and run, just because you can have those up trades in certain moments. But I still think it's pretty inconsistent. I still think we're waiting for a good ball search to sort of break this card wide open. So yeah, I don't rate it, but it's been in enough renditions of decks right now as a stage 1 in terms of experimentation and trying to patch up otherwise awful matchups. So that's going to be its role going forward as well, I would say. Keldeo, I put a 3-star. I think that's still the right place to put this card. Quad Keldeo was a thing that turned up at Worlds. I remember seeing Kika's very interesting list that was playing heavy Vaporeon in day 1. I think there was a couple other Keldeo-based builds in day 2 of Worlds as well. We've seen, I think it made top 8 of the Australian special after Worlds, the Quagnag deck, and that kind of really gave this card a bit of a breath of life. I think a lot of people are trying out that sort of build right now. So there's 2 kind of builds of Keldeo going around. There's the one that has like Victini to power it up, the Victory Sign Victini, I want to say it's called, to power a bunch up, and then you play Quad Keldeo basically. And then there's like the 2 or 3 copies of Keldeo in Quagnag right now, and you can see I sort of had those outlined on the screen. We all sort of knew that was a thing. The reason I didn't rate this higher was because I didn't think Quagnag would work because it's too inconsistent without all of its ball search. But people are still trying to play Quagnag. Fortunately for Quagnag, its typing is super insano right now, and that's one of the things carrying it. Fun fact, I don't think... Well, not fun fact, but from my own opinion, Quagsire actually has a weak Ability-Zard matchup. That's my own personal opinion. But yeah, I think enough people are playing this archetype to keep it at a 3-star. Keldeo's ability will remain strong. Obviously, Power Plant's still going to be good come Cosmic Eclipse. Chaotic Swell will probably help Keldeo, though, because people can't just jam a Power Plant and get through you. If you can Chaotic Swell, they then have to find like Power Plant, waste a turn, pass into you. Then you can, then they have to like have a free board again. So if Keldeo Chaotic Swell becomes a thing, maybe it's way more dangerous against some of these decks that are trying to use Power Plant to get around Keldeo, and it may force more non-GXs into builds. So that's a bit of a fear factor for this archetype. It does gain a very, very powerful Stadium card going forward, and that will be awkward to deal with. But there are still a bunch of archetypes out there that will have non-GXs to get through this, but I think Keldeo is safe as a 3-star right now. Lapras, 2-star. It's what I gave the Misty, so we'll keep it that way just for the Ducks. Slowduck, we'll give it 2-star. It had a highlight reel moment in the Open after Worlds, well, during Worlds, I guess. I think it got top 8 or it got top 32 or something like that in one of the Open flights, and that sort of sparked joy and made people play this build. I tried it out with the Lance Dragonite package way back when, so I'm glad I was on the ball for that one. The one thing I did was I went too far with it. I tried playing Whitneys and all that sort of random stuff, but a lot more traditional supporter line was in order. Making space for custom catchers was worthwhile. But Slowduck is a nice tag team slayer still. I think he is still in the rogue sort of arena right now, but I think he's good enough as an experimenter and a 2-star for me. Tapu Fini, I put it 2 stars. I think that's pretty much where we let him lie right now. Blounds is among the best decks. You'd say it's easily in like the top 7 or 8 decks right now, but it's not in the top 3, and that means that Tapu Fini is not going to see a huge amount of play. Things like Mewtwo and Pikarom are trying to get around this card in different methods. Abilities Art now is playing so many non-GXs that Tapu Fini is probably a little bit irrelevant. And there's things like Quagnag and stuff anyway that doesn't need this. Like Guardian goes about it a different way. Pidgeotto control. Nothing really needs to play the Tapu Fini right now. So I think we'll keep it as a 2-star just because Blounds is relevant enough. And every now and then you'll see one sneak into lists. But I think it's not super relevant at all. Eelektross, we'll put him down to a 1-star. He's not seen any play in the Pikaroms other than like pre-Worlds experimentation. The sort of theory behind him was that he could be tanky against things like Malamar and other players like that. You can do 130 knockout stuff, and then you're being able to take hits, but more often than not, people just add in Hoopas to Pikarom now. So, yeah, 1-star for Eelektross. He's not worked out. Too expensive of an attack cost. Choo-Choo, we'll keep him as a 4-star, maybe as a 5-star, but Choo-Choo is, you know what, we'll give him a 5-star. I think he's definitely a strong enough card to warp Pikarom. In all the tag team matchups, he's the star boy, right? You have Tandem Shock either trying to buy you a turn with Paralysis, or you have Lightning Ride taking 3 prizes in one go thanks to finding 1 E-Power, basically, after full blitzing onto him and stuff. So I think this card is definitely a driving force in why Pikarom's so strong. You Tag Bolt in a lot of matchups, but you also Lightning Ride it in a lot of matchups. Even though Choo-Choo is sometimes only a one-off copy in Pikarom, he's still just like a big deal. And yeah, we've got to call him a 5-star because Pikarom's like in the top 3 decks right now. Choo-Choo is absolutely nuts. Yeah, very good card. Stunfisk, 1-star. Zapdos is no longer a thing. Coco, 1-star. Not relevant enough. Xurkitree, I put him at a 3-star. I was basically saying that this is a better Buzzwole with worse typing, but you had E-Power to sort of balance the scales. Buzzwole is still seeing like a... Well, Buzzwole's not even seeing play anymore. That's how crazy it is that non-GX decks like aren't even seeing play anymore. Even things like Buzzwole, which was previously just like seen everywhere. It's just the lack of searchability behind these cards, basically, which is why this is kind of flopping. You can see on screen I had like Jirachi with Zapdos and with Spiritomb. Spiritomb Beast is kind of like a low-key thing, but really not that good. So I'm going to put Xurkitree down to a 1-star even. You can see him sometimes in Naga chess decks. That's about the only place you see Xurkitree. So as good as the 3 Mirrors attack is, when you can't search the guy very easily, he's not going to be all that relevant. Aegislash I put at 2. I'm going to put him down to a 1-star. Yes, he still sees experimentation, but he's worse than Malamar. Beheeyem, I'm going to up him to 2 stars. We found a way to play Mysterious Noise over and over again. It required Pidgeotto to cycle through your deck, and you use the likes of Goomy, Mareep, and most importantly, the Alolan Ninetales that we saw at Worlds with Hampus do pretty well. So he made it through the day 1 field. He definitely put Beheeyem on the map, and there is Ninetales keeping this deck at bay right now for sure. And there's also what's it called, Mewtwo with its big Espeon Deoxys spread that can also keep this at bay for a little bit. But I think Mysterious Noise is still good enough to be like a tier 3 archetype. So yes, Beheeyem up to 2 stars for sure. Drifblim 1-star, not good enough. It's stage 1. Espeon Deoxys, oh boy. I gave this a 2-star rating. And cast your minds back towards pre-Worlds, where Spell Tag Mally had never been a thing that worked. Spell Tag Mally was tried in Lost Thunder, basically, right? We got the new Giratina, we got the Spell Tag, and we were like, let's play Spread Mally. That'll be a good deck. And it never was. Everyone just preferred Ultra Necrozma, or everyone preferred, even other versions that just didn't play Spell Tags, just regular Psychic Mally without tags, like gas can builds. And that was the real thing holding back Espeon Deoxys in my mind. I was like, okay, there's potentially 3 Malamar builds. There's Ultra, there's Psychic, and there's potentially Tina Chomp coming out as well. And I was like, Espeon Deoxys is a star player in only one of those builds. I'll only give this a 2-star. Here's the thing. The Psychic build trumped the other 2, became the only playable Malamar deck left, and this guy is the reason why it works. Cross Division is the finishing move in most situations. So for his Malamar presence, we've got to at least bump him to 4 stars. But I'm going to go one step further, bump him up to the 5, because he was also the linchpin in Mewtwo. Mewtwo can win so many unwinnable matchups because of this card alone. I'll be very upset when we get onto the Mewtwo slide that I didn't have SBDO on that slide. I have a million GXs, but SBDO was not one of them, which is a real shame for me, because that was the card that made Mewtwo insane, and it wasn't caught on by enough people. Only a handful of very intelligent players were able to see this combo at its full potential, where you can just welder and get there, because it means that Mewtwo now can beat Pidgeot to control, you can beat Malamar if you do this early enough, you can beat all sorts of random non-GX decks, and even when you're up against like some GXs, you'll still get a shift in from cross division. Sometimes you can play around B-String with this card against Blacephalon. Sometimes you can knock out like something you've powered up, or something you've hit with like Solgaleo, and then you can also knock out like a free Jirachi, or set something up, some other tag team up in the background as well. So yeah, SBDO, nuts card. You can see most people were pretty low on it. So it wasn't just me not seeing his full potential, but it turns out Tina Tags is the best way to play Mally. Pretty much the only way to play Mally, really, in this format. And he is also a crucial one-of in Mewtwo. I think this card is the reason why you play Psychics in Mewtwo. It's not for his own GX attack. It's not for Latios. Maybe for Mark a little bit now. But this is the main reason why you play Psychics and not just pure Fire, because cross division is super, super good. Giratina 1-star. We don't need Searchable E-Hammer. We're in a basic energy format. Jirachi 3-star. Yeah, it's in every like mainline Mewtwo deck as a one-of. It's not in any like other archetypes, and there are some decks that splash in Mewtwo and don't need Jirachi, but this is an integral piece of Mewtwo. I guess you could even call this a 4-star, because it's like a guaranteed one-of in Mewtwo, which is a top-tier deck. Latios, I'll keep at 3 stars, I think. No, let's put him at 4. We'll bump him up to 4 stars. Mewtwo's a good enough archetype, and it's not a staple, but it's a very often seen card in Latios. And there are even some builds of Malamar also teching in Latios GX now as well. So I think this card is just about good enough because of Mally and Mewtwo together to call this a 4-star card. You'll usually see him in Mewtwo. He really helps out against some tag team archetypes like Pikarom and Greenzard and stuff. So yeah, just about relevant enough to still see play in those decks, and obviously good in Malamar as well recently. Mewtwo&Mew. We knew this was a 5-star card. It was just deciphering which was the correct method. Pre-Worlds, there was all sorts of talk going on. There was the Japanese sort of Mina lists that we heard about. There were Welder lists, and there were Malamar lists, and there were Rainbow builds as well. So there were plenty of things on the table. Unfortunately, I didn't have space in my brain or on this slide to put Espeon Deoxys, and that was probably the biggest oversight of them all. Would have been the thing that probably blew this deck wide open, in my opinion. Obviously, everyone was still hyped on it, because basically the idea was this is so versatile that someone will find a way to make it work, and obviously someone did. It's won Worlds. It's continued to see some success in regionals and whatnot. Not as much success as I would have imagined, but the tins have finally come out for Mewtwo&Mew, so the deck is more accessible and less expensive. It is still a difficult deck to play in some aspects, definitely compared to the likes of Pikarom and Abilitizard, I would say. It's probably the hardest to play top tier archetype right now, just because of how difficult sequencing can be, and throwing the right Pokemon into the bin at the right times and stuff isn't always intuitive. So I think that's something that Mewtwo has to build off of, but yeah, the archetype's nuts, and come Cosmic Eclipse, I don't see that changing too much either. So even this game's Chaotic Swell. If you want to play this over the one copy of Viridian, you can protect around Power Plant like way better, which is pretty cool. It could also buy you a space, because you might not need the Marshadow as much, which is also great. Uxie 1-star, irrelevant card. I bet you all forgot about this already. Aerodactyl, I put it 3 stars. I think we'll put him down to a 2-star alongside all the other Fossil stuff. I think Fossils overall kind of flopped. I tried it out with Welder. I was like pretty happy, but that's, you know, pre-Worlds when I thought Pikarom was like the deck to beat. And now it's not the only deck to beat. There's other things out there for you. So Aerodactyl struggles because of that. Archeops 1-star, obviously. Breloom 1-star, obviously. Garchomp, obvious. Zygarde, I was a little bit too much of a believer because he is at least a basic, but we still don't have enough Ball Search for this card to work. We'll put him down to a 1-star. Hoopa. Oh, Hoopa, what have I done? I've done the same trap again. I remember during my video, I was like, yeah, it's Evil Admonition again. I'm giving it 1 star again. I was wrong again about Evil Admonition. Why do I keep devaluing this amazing attack? You can see on the slide, I was like, yeah, Giratina, you know, he kills Giratinas, but then Giratina just spell tags and kills you back. Why is that good? Well, the oversight was Lysander Labs is obviously a thing that a lot of decks are playing. That makes Hoopa like a pretty much very good one-of in Pikarom right now. Not a staple one-of, but one that you can see in the deck for sure. It's a card that I would play in Pikarom. But there's another oversight here. It's that Jirachi and, you know, Mewtwo decks will oftentimes have like a good amount of Pokemon in play on turn 1 with abilities. Think about things like Pikarom. They'll oftentimes have a Jirachi, a Dedenne, a Zeraora in play. Abilities can have, you know, Dedenne, Heatran, Jirachi. Sometimes, like, all of these decks could also have a second Jirachi in play just if the active one gets knocked out. And all of that means you can take a nice early Grinch prize with a 1 energy attacker that's colorless as well. So that means that Hoopa's good in Abilities in my opinion. I still play him. I think he's great. He improves the Malamar because you are gusting around spell tags. So he's a 2-shot for them, which is really annoying for them. And he's good enough at just taking knockouts on Jirachis. So many decks are Stellar Wish based right now that you can take that easy, cheeky prize with Hoopa, and it means you only have to get through 1 tag team, then gust a Dedenne for game, and Hoopa makes that possible. So yeah, this card is really, really good. I'm going to bump him up to 4 stars. He is, in my opinion, worth it in both Pikarom and Reshizard. He's not seen all the time in both of them, but he is a consideration for both of those top tier archetypes. And he's also, you know, like a gateway card for a bunch of other non-GX decks as well. Because he's good enough against Mewtwo, good enough against anything with Jirachi, and he also helps out the Malamar matchup for sure, especially if you play Labs. Sabltar, I'm going to do all the dark stuff, give them the same treatment, bump them down to 2 stars. The archetypes do get stronger. I think Greedy Crush will be back in a big way come Cosmic Eclipse, but I'm going to give Dark the same treatment and bump them all down to 2 stars. I'll keep Weavile at 3 because he's the flagship card. And he still keeps it all together, but yeah, I think they're all kind of like tier 3, 4 decks if you accept a tier 4 as a thing. And they'll get better. Don't worry about them. They'll be fine. Mawile, easy 1 star. This is not good enough. Whimsicott, I gave the 2-star rating. He did see play in the Whimsicott Porygon list, and he definitely is worth playing in that build. Porygon Whimsicott is also on that rogue side of things, though, so we'll keep him at 2 stars. Chomptina, I gave a 3-star rating. Obviously saw play at Worlds, didn't do good at Worlds, and now he's off the map. So we'll bump him down to a 2-star. He can be played in Malamar still, but why would you? It's proven itself to not be strong enough. Dragonite, we could bump this up from a 1-star if I really wanted to, but I mean, I'll probably keep this as a 1-star. Like, because he's just part of the Lance package in exactly Slowduck, probably doesn't warrant him being more than a 1-star, but if you are feeling frisky, you could try and have that. Also, there's the Dragonite GX combo, which I haven't really like fully built a list for just yet. It might be something I try and explore over the next few days. Dragonite GX, 3-star. I think 3 stars still fair. I think most of the time he's outclassed by Magcargo at this point, so you could arguably put him down to a 2-star, but obviously this deck this card was in a bunch of Mewtwo builds and still is in a bunch of Mewtwo builds. So I wouldn't write him off. I still think he's a pretty reasonable card. I wouldn't like dislike seeing him in any of your Mewtwo decks. I just don't personally play it over Magcargo. It's a little bit less versatile overall. Haxorus is a stage 2. Latias is a spreading card, but it's not as good as Esper. So yeah, outclassed there. Naganadel, I put at 4 stars. I remember in this slide talking about him being a 4-star card simply because of Blacephalon, and that's pretty much been the case. He's in here simply for Blacephalon, but I also underestimated his ability to go into Mewtwo decks. So yeah, he's a great sniper in Mewtwo. He will oftentimes give Mewtwo game on board unless the opponent is able to knock out the active Mewtwo or put down a Mew on that turn. and there are some decks not playing Mew at all right now, so Venom Shot literally does just, you know, offer game, even if the Mewtwo player is reset stamped or whatever else. They don't need to do anything else, they can just announce, let me kill that Dedenne for game. And yeah, that's pictured on the slide, of course. So we had the foresight of that. It's not all about the Ultra Conversion, but that's the reason why he's so good in Blounce, giving you some extra consistency. There was also the Naga chess deck. I was trying to piece it all together in my head here. Obviously, I didn't do a great job of piecing it together, but I did at least have the Stinger combo pictured. It took a bigger brain than me to make the Naga chess deck work. I would still say Naga chess is like on the rogue side of things, and we probably won't see success from it from many people outside of those dedicated towards the deck. But yeah, I think it's, you know, continuing to be good. I think Ultra Conversion could still be a thing in the new Reshiram archetype, because that is often going to be playing a thick line of Naga, so this could be your backup draw engine. Blacephalon's still good, and there's a few other like Ultra Beast based decks out there as well. There's, you know, Ultra Beast support coming in the next set, thanks to Beastite and a few other things as well. So this could see even more play going forward as well, even alongside its Naga Guzzlord tag team partner as well. So this card will continue to see play and is definitely a 4-star. Noivern, easy 1-star. Ordino, outclassed by Jirachi, as we all know. Munchlax saw a little highlight reel moment in, who was it? It was Kika's Keldeo list, right? Because he could recover some like trainer cards and stuff. So that was pretty reasonable, but I think overall he is still a 1-star. Super niche overall. And yeah, that rounds out the ratings, guys. I only got a few blunders in there. I think the Heatran, the Hoopa, and the SBDO were probably the only big blunders from this set. I think overall I was pretty close on the money. Sometimes it's a star point here or there or whatever. But overall I think I was pretty reasonable on most of these things. Let me know what you guys think about the set review. Let me know what you think of Cosmic Eclipse. I hope you're looking forward to that. And get involved in that community review as well. I'll make sure that I link it below so you can have your say. But yeah, this format is, you know, although it's still fairly new, it feels really weird because we've had Worlds and then there's been a few regionals afterwards. Cologne and AC are this weekend, and that will be one of the last tournaments we have of this set. So that's pretty awesome. We get to move on to Cosmic Eclipse pretty soon, and I'm hoping that changes things up because there are too many decks out there that are just playing full Welder and dominating the game. So it'll be interesting to see how we move forward. Thanks for watching the video today, guys. I hope you did enjoy, and look forward to the set review coming soon. Cheers.